Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week, I don't know if it's a good decision, but I've decided that I'm going to talk about composition. I've spoken about composition before in this channel a while ago, but I haven't really mentioned it for a long time, and perhaps for good reason. Composition is the kind of thing that it can be complicated or it can be amorphous. It's basically lots of people have lots of ideas, and when you first come across it, it's a bit like, well, okay, you're saying this and he's saying that and that person over there is saying something different. Who am I supposed to believe? I think that's the big problem with composition and when you're first approaching it. So let me first of all say that everything that I'm about to say should be taken with a huge pinch of salt. It is just my opinions, and that is sort of the key thing. That's the thing that I'm trying to get across on this art channel, is art is not about rules. There are no rules. Forget about rules. There's nothing carved in stone or written down on a book. Everything is subjective. Everything is personal opinions, and anything can be art. That's my opinion. And different people will disagree with that opinion. But that's the point I'm making. It is all just entirely subjective. So everything I'm about to say is just my opinions. These are not rules, they're just my ideas, which you can accept or reject or think, well, okay, I'll use them as a starting point for creating my own ideas, which is what I would really encourage you to do. By all means, listen to other people, listen to my ideas, listen to someone else who has completely different ideas. And then from that, start to build your own ideas about what type of art you want to create, because I think that's the essence of art. It's about expressing your individuality, expressing yourself as an artist. So having said all of that, these are my ideas about composition. So I think art is all about, when you're making art, it's all about making choices. So you start off, well, what media or what mediums am I going to use? What color palette am I going to use? Is it going to be on canvas or paper, etc., etc.? With all these choices. And it's the same with composition. So the first choice you have to make with composition is about focal points. Is your painting or drawing going to contain a focal point or focal points? Or are you going to create a painting and drawing that has no focal points? Both options are perfectly valid. I tend to go with the no focal point approach. And there is a reason why. It's not just a random thing, oh, I think I'll not put any focal points. There is a reason why I choose that option. So let me try and explain why. If you have a painting or drawing, a landscape painting or drawing, like the one I'm using, this little painting here just for an example, there are no buildings, there are no people, there are no animals. So it's just a landscape, a pure 100% just landscape. So therefore the landscape is what you notice first. As the viewer, you notice the landscape because there's nothing else in there to notice. If I was to put animals, birds, a building, some people or something into that landscape, chances are you would notice the people or the buildings or the animals first because of contrast. Their shapes are different from the overall shapes that you get in the landscape. Therefore it creates that contrast, and the human eye tends to fixate on contrasts and differences. So those contrasts could be shapes, it could be colors, it could be values, different things, but it's that contrast that kind of catches our eye. When that happens, then the building or the person, the animal, whatever, becomes the focal point within the painting. And the rest of the painting, the landscape itself, kind of gets pushed back, and it just becomes a context, a background for the main focal point. So that's the reason why I don't include animals, people, or buildings in my landscapes. I don't want the landscape to get pushed back. I don't want it to be a background. I want the landscape to be the thing that people look at. But as I say, it's just a choice. I think now that maybe I've explained my way of thinking, it's something that, you can be aware of, and maybe you can decide, well, yes, I agree with that, or no, I don't agree with it. But I think that awareness helps you to make an informed choice of what direction you want to go in as an artist. So the next time that you're creating a landscape, maybe just stop and think, do you want the landscape to be everything? Or do you want the landscape to get kind of pushed back as a background, a context for some figures or animals or buildings or something? Anyway, this is how I think about creating landscapes, and why I don't have any focal points in my landscapes. The next part, so because I'm not creating focal points within the landscape, I have to think about composition in a different way. When you have a focal point, then the whole thing about composition becomes how do you maximize that contrast? How do you maximize the focal point and get the viewer to focus on that focal point, if you like, and then go out from that into the rest of the painting? That's the way that composition works when you have a focal point within the painting. It's kind of all about controlling the viewer's eye, if you like, how they look at your painting. Because I don't have any focal points, all of that I just ignore. It's nothing to do with me. I'm not interested in it. I reject it all. But I still have to think about composition. So I have to think about composition in a different way. So for me then, composition is not about focal points, but instead it's about an abstract pattern of shapes, basic shapes. The landscape is made up of shapes, flat two-dimensional shapes that you can arrange on your flat two-dimensional surface. That is how I look at landscapes, and it is a very, I guess, abstract way. But I think all painting, drawing is abstract because we're trying to represent a three-dimensional world on a flat two-dimensional surface. So there is a degree of abstraction there. No matter what style or how you think about composition or your style of drawing or anything. Okay, I think I'm going off at tangents here, so let me try and come back. As I say, I'm trying to think about composition as big shapes within the landscape. So let's look at some examples then. So again, using that same painting, the first line, the first shapes that I put into the landscape is the horizon line that divides the sky from the land, and the shape of that line, the position of that line, that's the first sort of compositional choice that I'm making. From that, I can then decide within the land itself, what other divisions am I going to put in to create these different shapes. And the idea is to create something that is interesting, that looks aesthetically pleasing perhaps. That's the idea. Now, again, it's all subjective. What some people find aesthetically pleasing, other people don't, and so on. But I'm trying to create something that appeals to me. And then if other people like it, that's great. But anyway, this is my approach to composition. I reject focal points, and instead I make the landscape the thing that I want the viewer to really focus on. And then I start thinking about the big shapes within the landscape, the land and the sky, and how I divide up the land, and also how you can divide up the sky by adding in clouds, it can create different shapes within the sky. Anyway, I hope that makes some sort of sense. It's sort of the best way I can try and explain it. It is my ideas about composition at the moment. These ideas have evolved over the last few years and probably will continue to evolve in the future. But at this moment in time, this is how I think about creating landscapes and how I think about composition within landscapes. If you made it this far, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you in next week's video.